Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Chiang. Welcome back to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. I'm so excited to introduce this week's guest, Dr. Kristi Klee, who is an example of how real estate can quickly get you to financial freedom. Kristi and I think we met probably online, just in the world of physician real estate investors. And I remember when we were at Passive Income MD Con last year in 2022, where you got up on stage and said that you were able to achieve financial freedom with one short-term rental. And there was like a gasp through the crowd. So I really want the guests to hear your story. When did you first start deciding that you want to invest in real estate?
Yeah, so pretty early on in getting to my attending career as a physician, I started looking at it. We got hit pretty hard, I think, my first year out as an attending because of the lopsided incomes between my husband and I, and with some moonlighting. And so all of a sudden, we had more income one year, and we had this like $40,000 tax thing that still, one of us being a resident, it was like, where do we come up with the $40,000? Like, that just seemed crazy. And we realized that we're like, oh my gosh, like we're just going to have these massive taxes. And so early on, I started looking at trying to figure out how do I offset a W-2 income, found out, well, there's not really any great ways with the exception of reps other than this short-term rental loophole. And so I started looking into it and kind of digging deep. And I went to my husband and I'm like, oh my gosh, I have the best idea. I think we should do real estate and do short-term rentals and be able to offset our W-2 income. And he said, absolutely not. I'm not going to be a landlord. And I'm like, I know. But then I went through and I started doing some really deep digging and getting the numbers and looking at kind of the overall massive returns you can get within short-term rentals, how wealth is created within real estate in general, how the tax benefits. And my husband, who's the numbers guy, a math major, I kept coming back and being like, but look at these numbers. Look at what you can do in this space. Like, show me where you can create this kind of wealth at this kind of speed in any other place of real estate. Took me about 5 years of doing kind of deep analysis paralysis, learning, educating myself, trying to really understand how real estate works. And my husband said, if we're going to do this, I have zero interest in growing a real estate empire. We're physicians. Like, I don't want a second job career empire that we have to manage with our work, our physician life, our kids, all of that. And so he said, if we're going to do this, we're going to get to financial freedom in as few doors as possible.
So when did you first start kind of doing the research?
So back in about 2013, so fairly quick out of residency, we were kind of trying to get all the education and learning back then. But it did take us about 5 years of trying to figure this out.
So it was when you finished residency, did your husband finish residency or his training about the same time?
He finished fellowship a year after I did.
Okay, so basically both of you got into your attending incomes within about a year of each other and just saw how much you were paying in taxes.
Yep.
And when did you first learn of the short-term rental loophole?
I think that was, I don't know whether it was White Coat Investor or on one of the physician community, it just, somebody made a comment about it, saying you can offset your W-2 income. And it was like, wait, hold up. And so started to do the research on that and find out that, yeah, if you self-manage, you are no longer needing it to fall in this reps category. You're actually a hospitality business. And so by putting it in the hospitality business bucket, you, one, are a business owner, but the income from short-term rentals is able to offset active income versus if you don't have rep status, real estate is labeled as passive income. By being a real estate professional, again, it becomes active, but we had no desire to go down the reps pathway. And so by doing short-term rentals, it really allowed us to get the same tax benefit as similar to a reps professional.
Yeah, and just to clarify for the audience, REPS is real estate professional status and requires you to work at least 750 hours in real estate, and you have to do more time in real estate than any other job. So as a full-time physician, very difficult. Even as a part-time physician, can take some navigating.
Mm-hmm. Yep, for sure. And so that's where we really started to do that deep dive into how do we do this within the short-term rental space. Plus, like, really like the idea of having a lifestyle asset where we have a place that we could go visit and be able to use and grow our family memories at a place that we enjoy staying at as well. And so we kind of did the deep dive and decided to go really big. When we ran the numbers, we realized that if we decided to go big and go for a place that had multiple bedrooms, can fit multiple families, therefore can really charge top dollar rent, because there's only 365 days of the year that you can rent it out, right? And you don't even have to be 90% booked. Our places can be 50% booked, but because we can charge really high dollar amounts in the high season, we can bring in a very significant amount of income from even one door. And so we sat down and kind of ran our numbers of what does it look like to have our living expenses covered. And so if we could cover that, then we would get to financial freedom. And so our living expenses were about $150,000 of expense that we needed to be able to cover. And then we started looking at could we do that in just one short-term rental door? And that was kind of our marker and our why and how we moved forward in trying to look at places.
And so you said it took about 5 years of learning and analysis paralysis.
Mm-hmm.
So what got you to finally bite the bullet and take action?
That's a really good question. I think it was getting to the point where it's like a little bit now or never, especially because we were going big. It was going to be this faith leap regardless of when we took the leap into doing it. I think there was a few things that happened at my job that really made me appreciate the fact that at some point I am an employee and I can be asked to work more, do more. And at some point, I might be hit with a point where I'm saying, I'm burned out and can't do this anymore. I also had a physician colleague who ended up, we lost to suicide, which I think was one of the things that also was a big impact on me saying, like, I need to be able to control how I practice medicine. I need to be able to tap out and say, you know what, this no longer fits with my goals and how I want to live my life. And that was a big impetus to say, you know what, it's now or never. And when we really did the analysis, you have to really be off on your numbers to end up substantially losing money in real estate and not being able to offset it with deductions or things like that if you do lose money. And so, is there a risk? Absolutely. But also, there's a risk with putting money in the stock market, right? I learned that pretty easy when I put my first $1,000 in the stock market and overnight it dropped in half. It was like, whoa. And typically that type of thing doesn't necessarily happen in real estate without ways of mitigating that and pivoting and mitigating that risk. And so we finally just kind of decided to go big and dive in.
And so in going big, that generally means that you need a fairly sizable down payment as well as money to potentially buy furnishings or do renovations. So how did you prepare for that part of it?
Yeah, so like most of us, we aren't sitting on cash in bank accounts that is just free money. We had a little bit of a savings that we had for our emergency fund, but the rest of it, I mean, we're investing in our kids' college funds, 529s. We had our 401ks. I mean, we were doing the typical things that all of us were doing. And what we realized is that, yes, we can continue to have those retirement buckets, but this is also going to be a separate retirement bucket for us. And also a multifaceted way of having a return on investment. And so if we were going to make this happen, we needed to be really creative about ways of coming up with that money because we were going big. Our rental properties are more than our homes. And at that point in time, we were still fairly new out of residency. So it's not like we had accumulated a whole bunch of wealth, but we had the strategies in place to say, okay, how do we come up with some cash now with the strategy to use that money to rapidly get that money back out of the property and to reinvest in either more real estate or back into where we borrowed that money from. And this is the magic of real estate in general, is that ability to take tax return money and use that to get money back, or you can refinance, or there's so many different ways of then once you have that money snowballing, getting back money out of real estate and being able to recycle it or pay back where you borrowed from, etc. And so for us, we did a few different things. We took our tax return from the previous year. We stopped contributing for like 6 or 7 months to our kids' 529 and then our 401k. My husband did get a little bit of an inheritance from a family member that we put to it. And then we borrowed against money that was sitting in our 401k that we would have to pay back with interest to ourselves, but it was money that we could leverage to get this short-term rental. And I know there's different thoughts about how 10% versus 20% down affects your overall cash on cash numbers and your cash flow. We felt more comfortable putting 20% down, having the higher cash flow, even if that gave us the slightly lower cash on cash number, because we knew we were going to get the money back out in several different ways in pretty short order. And therefore, we put 20% down, which again was a fairly large amount of money that we came up with in a pretty short amount of time by creatively saying, okay, where do we pull from to make this happen? Knowing that we are putting some other things on hold, but our long-term ability to reach those financial goals as quickly as possible will be benefited by leveraging different things.
Yeah, I love how you broke that all out, because I know when people first start looking at real estate investing, it's like, well, how am I supposed to come up with some six-figure amount? But if you're creative, if you start looking, well, where's the money going? Where can I get money? Where are places I can borrow from? There are ways to find it.
Yep.
So now you're looking for that first investment. How do you start that search process?
So I have subsequently fallen into mentoring people who are interested in getting going in short-term rentals. And I will tell people that if you can start with your why, you should have much easier solutions to be able to get you through any of your analysis paralysis, because you can, as soon as you figure out a strong enough why that really motivates you, you can then figure out exactly what that looks like and then how to get there. And so for us, it really was, how can we have large income producing properties that are in locations that we want to go and visit and make memories for our family and get us to financial freedom. And so we started getting general areas we were looking for, started running the numbers, figuring out, tweaking what type of property, what type of location that would fit what we were looking for. And we started narrowing it down from there and just starting to run the numbers on property. And we were just determined to make it happen.
And did you look all over the place? Were there certain markets that you were more attracted to?
Yeah, so for us, we live in Minnesota, and so we want to get out of here in the middle of winter. So we were looking at beach rental markets, especially areas that we knew would bring in high levels of return. And so that was kind of where we started, was looking at a number of different beach markets that we'd run some numbers on and known look like on the first glance that they would probably do well. And then we really started driving down the numbers within those different markets and really deciding what worked for us, for the fact that it was going to be a lifestyle asset for us, but also for the numbers to make sense as well. Our second property, we then decided to look in the mountains and more of a ski town and be able to have that as kind of our second lifestyle asset. And so that was our driving factor when we were looking for our second place.
Right. So where did you end up buying your first property?
So down in the Destin Miramar Beach area.
And can you tell us more just about the property?
Sure. So the property was about $1.9 million. It's a 9-bedroom down there. That market is much more of a seasonal market where it's really almost every property gets booked in the middle of the summer. And so really targeting family-friendly places that can bring in multiple families together to be able to enjoy a week of vacation in the summer was what we found as the niche that really did well in that market. And that's one of the things that I talk to people that I work with. They'll be like, well, I looked at every single property in that market and it doesn't make any sense. And then when you start asking, okay, well, what exactly were you looking at? They'll have a certain price point and a certain type of property. And sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, that's not going to work in that market because maybe they're looking at condos and the HOA fees are going to be too high. Or, our 9-bedroom property in the Florida Panhandle does great. I don't think a 9-bedroom property would do great in downtown LA. So I think that there's different places that if you really start driving down on kind of what you have to work with from purchase price, what makes sense in that market, and then seeing if those two you can run the numbers to make sense, I think is a great place to start.
Yeah, that's so important to really run the numbers and to look at how you can distinguish yourself from other short-term rentals in the same area.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
So you bought the first property. How soon was it then afterwards that you bought the second one?
So I should actually clarify. We actually went and bought the property in Steamboat technically before we bought our property in Destin, but it did take us 2 years to build that property. And so I technically say our Destin property, we got live first, but we actually had both of them purchased before we were live with the Destin property, partially because we got a little impatient waiting for the getting our property that we were building live. And so we were managing both of those and also came up with very large down payments for both of these properties without the income coming in. But again, we had done the due diligence to say, we just needed to get to being live, and we knew that we would be able to offset and have that money coming in, repay ourselves, get the money back into the accounts that we had borrowed from.
All right, so just to clarify, so you have a property in Steamboat, which was a new construction. So it took 2 years to build. So you essentially purchased it, but you didn't have the property to actually have guests in it for 2 years.
Yep.
And then while that was being built, you then went and bought another property in Destin.
Yep.
And between these two properties, now the first property brought you financial freedom and the second property replaced your clinical income, if I remember correctly.
Yep, exactly. And so, yeah, again, I work as a hospitalist and it's been able to replace my full-time clinical income. I work part-time, but now on a schedule that I kind of choose and can decide how much I still want to do. And it's been working pretty well. So.
Yeah, and that's what I love is that your example that you get to work because you want to work, not because you have to work. And so you can kind of set your schedule and very easily say no when it doesn't work for you.
Yep. And I will also say, like, I was recently at one of the physician real estate conferences, and people were like, well, what's next? And my answer was this, like, this is next for the time being. Like, we're there from a financial freedom standpoint. I'm still enjoying working as a physician. I enjoy doing it even more so part-time than full-time. My husband still wants to work because he's enjoying his job. And we've never had the goal of having this, massive empire. And so it's one of those, I really like the book Die with Zero because it frames the mindset of at some point, money is money, right? And what is the goal of money and what are you doing with it? And right now, my goal is to be living each day with my kids before, they're still youngish. And so trying to make sure that the time I have while they're still in the house is really being maximized to be here available with them and really just trying to live the life on my terms.
Yeah. And then let's talk more about how you dove in and bought these two really large properties before you even got cash flow from the first one. And certainly when I bought my first term rental, I was very much in the mindset of like, I'm going to buy one, see how I like this, see how it goes before I consider another one.
Yeah, and I do think there's a lot of people that's the comfort zone where especially they'll say, oh, I want to buy small and then I'll go bigger. Totally get it. And I do think if you go back to your why, what you're trying to accomplish and really defining that, I think that works for a lot of people. Again, our why was fewest doors to financial freedom. And so it didn't make sense for us to buy small properties. gets harder to get loans the more properties you have. For a number of different reasons, we said, if we're going to do this, we just need to do it. We need to rip off the bandage that we've been sitting with for 5 years of analysis paralysis and just do it. We were very strategic with being able to know that, like, that second property that we put money down on, we knew by the time we were purchasing it that it was a turnkey property. We could get it live pretty quickly. We were going to be making a pretty substantial amount of money within the first couple of months that was coming on. So we knew we had to and get to the closing and whatever, but we knew that money was going to rapidly come back and be able to be recycled and used and offset things. And so we were very strategic with how we did that. But yes, it 100% was ripping off the bandage as far as jumping in. And that's why it took us 5 years of kind of that mindset. And I will tell you, I'm sure, we've talked a lot about mindset together. I know both of us have had those, but I can't do it because I don't have the time. I can't do it because I don't have the smarts or I haven't been educated, or I can't come up with the money, or like all of these mindset barriers that, as we see in all areas of what physicians are accomplishing and real estate, these mindset barriers are things that if you really have a why that's driving you to get there, all of those are completely overcomable. You absolutely can come up with a solution. And I think we tell ourselves, well, I just can't do it. And I think some of the value of being able to be collaborating with other people who are doing it and in the space is so valuable to be like, okay, well, what if? Like, have you considered? And these are the things that you're just telling yourself, because honestly, if you have a big enough why you want to make it happen, you can make it happen.
Yeah, no, I do love that. So how long have you had the short-term rentals at this point?
So we're going on about 4th year.
And you self-manage both of them?
Yep.
Right. So it just shows, yes, it's possible to self-manage from a distance, from Minneapolis to Florida and to Colorado.
Yep. Yep. And you really need boots on the ground. You need a good handyman, you need good cleaners, and you need to build a relationship that you trust them and they trust you. And sometimes that takes a time or two to navigate whether it's going to be a good fit. And once you find the people who seem to really mesh well with you, you lean into them and create that relationship that says, what do you need to make this successful? And here's what we need. Can we make this work? And we've found with, some tweaking and stuff that we really have good teams that are boots on the ground. And then all of the stuff that the property management companies charge 20 to 40% to do, including the booking and communication and triaging issues or dynamics, 95% of that can be automated with good property management software. And so if you're able to set it up well, you can navigate that. I will say it is a learning curve, and it takes time when you're first setting it up to understand the process, get it set up right. But once you have it set up right, you can really spend minimal amount per week being able to do hands-on work in the properties when you're actually set up well.
Yeah, I know. I think it's crazy. I actually first started looking at short-term rentals back in 2009 in the Smoky Mountains area, and they wanted 50% for property management. And when you think about 50%, if your gross income is from the property is in the 6 figures, we're talking 100, 200, 300,000 for these really large properties. 200,000, 50% is 100,000. That is more than the average American makes.
Which is, yeah, it's just crazy to think about. So both of our properties bring in over 300,000 gross. If you're talking 40%, like in the steamboat market, I'm like, that's 120,000 of the gross. That doesn't include cleaning costs. That doesn't include actual hourly rates of any sort of handyman. It does include, some marketing and some communication and the coordination if you need the handyman, but the actual like repairs and stuff aren't usually included. Plus, they tend to nickel and dime you on things like sheets and, little other things that end up adding up. So the specific proportion that people end up paying tends to actually be higher than kind of that quoted rate. And when I look at that, I'm like, nobody's doing $120,000 of management on my property outside of cleaning and handyman work, right? And if so, how many people could I hire full time to even like, I could hire a bunch of college students full time to be able to like manage my properties if I want to go that route. But again, the technology is out there that it is very doable to do this yourself. I think when we were at the conference together recently, I pulled up and I was looking at how many calls and text messages had I had this summer, the entire summer during our busy season, Destin's busy season, and our second busy season for Steamboat. And I think I had like a total of 20 all summer long. And oftentimes those were quick responses of where is something located or how do I tweak something, and took, a text message back to somebody. I think oftentimes people are like, I don't want to unclog toilets at 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, well, I have no intention of unclogging toilets. And honestly, the people who are staying at our places are asleep at 2 o'clock in the morning. And so really, like, I think some of that fear mindset is what stands in the way of people going and diving in and learning the lessons and doing to grow in their path in real estate or whatever they're doing. We tell ourselves a lot of lies and things that become these huge, huge barriers that don't necessarily need to be there.
Yes, it's so true. I mean, yes, I don't love when something's broken, but it's literally a text and sending an image to my handyman being like, hey, can you take care of this? And it gets taken care of.
Yep. And that, again, is a mindset thing. This is where, if you start with your why and is this a property that is near and dear to your heart, that's going to be a lifestyle asset to your family, and you really cherish and want to make sure that you protect it so that, because anything breaking is going to be just, eat at your heart? Or can you wrap around your head around the mindset of, okay, things do occasionally break. I really have not had major, major things break by any of our guests, but there are little things. Some of them, sheets get ruined, and that's part, we build that into our cost structure, and it's the cost of doing business. And so we kind of write that off and we just plan for X number of new sheets a year. There are times where something breaks from the guest, and then we decide, was this negligence and being disrespectful, or was this just, oops, I have kids, things happen, right? And if it's just a oops, again, we can write it off and we build that in. If it's negligence, there's ways of mitigating that with short-term rental insurance that you can have the guests take. You can have the security deposits, which really people want their security deposits. So honestly, most of my guests treat our properties really pretty well. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, they're way cleaner than we leave places with 4 kids. And so, I think oftentimes people get so fearful of what breaks. And when you wrap your head around, okay, so you have a $200 thing that breaks, guess what? Like, if I can bring $25,000 in a rental on some of my weeks, $200 is a drop in the bucket to be like, well, yep, that booking was still worth it, right?
Yeah. And it's true. You can have guest insurance, which will cover even accidental breakage, even if it isn't out of negligence. And I had one guest who actually, I guess, broke some of the glasses, and they actually went to Target and bought more glasses, which I, totally unexpected, because I actually expect glasses to break.
Yep, me too. And that's one of those that I would be like, oh, well. But yeah, I mean, honestly, do we have some guests that give us a little bit of a headache where we're like, well, don't write this on any of the VRBO or Airbnb sites, but yes, some of my guests are a little annoying, but honestly, in a spectrum of like, it's very manageable. It tends to be the annoying, like, questions where it's like, I don't know what a security deposit is, or things like that, where it's like, okay, well, but honestly, when you get in the right mindset of like, this is a business, and the amount of time, energy, stress that I put into this business and the amount that it keeps me awake at night versus the amount of time, energy, and stress that I make from the income from my clinical job is just not comparable.
Yeah, so true. So now you actually help other people get into their own short-term rentals. You want to talk more about your program?
Yeah. So, like I said, I kind of fell into having people be like, wait, what did you do? Like, I need out of medicine now. How do I do this? And so I ended up like initially kind of talking through how to go about it with a few different people and kind of falling into mentorship. And what I realized is that there's a lot of people out there that are wanting to do something similar, and they think short-term rentals are the way to go about creating their wealth and to be able to really get them out of the rat race. Many of the people who have signed up to work with me actually have taken previous courses or listened to all the podcasts or read the books or whatever, and they're just stuck in this. I still don't know how to get there because, I got to the, like, sure, it laid out the basic groundwork of what this looks like, but what I'm doing looks slightly different. And especially in the short-term rental space, the nuance and the different niches, it's just, you have to understand the different moving dynamics much more than long-term rentals, where you kind of can understand what is the house pricing for the market, what is the typical rent, how do I get people in there, and you can kind of figure out how to budget and how to do this. Well, in short-term rentals, you have to figure out how do you keep it occupied, how do you do dynamic pricing, how do you buy the property that actually fits into the niche that's going to market well and going to withstand some of the fluctuations, because you have a property that's going to stay booked despite these fluctuations from either an economic standpoint or a saturation standpoint and all of these things. And so the people who kind of fell into working with me were looking for some of that additional, like, but now what? Now I don't know how to get over this. And so I really created the program that I thought would have gotten me to success quicker than 5 years. And so I created a course that goes over 6 months. It's got 30 modules. It's only short-term rentals, but it does give you the foundation of real estate in general within there, but it's focusing on short-term rentals versus multi-different classes like some other courses. And it also focuses a lot on not just how do you acquire the property, but also how do you set it up and how do you thrive when you start running into some of these dynamics where it's like, well, what do you do to tweak it to make it more efficient if it's not as profitable as you thought? And how do you manage some of those additional hospitality business aspects? And then I create a mastermind program where a small group of people get together and work together, bounce ideas off of each other, network each other, and grow kind of the overall community of who they can tap into to ask questions. Because I will tell you, as much as I've done this for several years, like I don't have all of the questions on all of the markets, on all of the type of properties. And anybody in the real estate space who's like, oh, I got it all figured out, is lying to you, because there's just so much variability. But now if all of a sudden you have a whole bunch of smart brains who have a lot of different feedback, being able to collaborate and network together, it's just so powerful to be in that type of dynamic with that mastermind. And then I add in one-on-one coaching and mentoring so that we can do the kind of deep dives that might take more time than what can it be accomplished in kind of those mastermind. And so between all of that, the people who have gone through my program have all been successful in getting to their goals. And it's impressive that sometimes the people coming in with one thought of what their goal is, and then they really define what it looks like. And I have people who have lots of different variety of what this looks like for them. And that's really cool, because I think oftentimes in this space, people are like, well, there's one way to do this, or I was told that this is the market to go to, or all of these things. And it's like the entire way to frame it and to get to success is actually figuring out what works for you. And so it's super fun to watch everybody else figure out what works for them and get to success in the way that does work for them.
That's so awesome. So how often do you run the program, and when's the next time you're starting it?
Last year, I just did it in the fall, and I'm going to again launch it this fall again. Again, this is my pet project that I get a lot of joy and value from helping other people and watching them grow. And so it's something that I've chosen not to do multiple times a year so that I can still protect time with my family kind of in the summer and stuff. So I typically will do it once a year in the fall.
And so that's coming up soon. If someone's interested in joining the next time you start this program, where can they find more information? Where can they sign up?
Yeah. So my website is rocketyourrental.com. Send me an email directly, rocketyourrental@gmail.com. I do have a couple of Facebook groups. There's a community of physicians in the Facebook group, Docs Maximizing Short-Term Rental Profit. I also have one for professionals who are not physicians. But yeah, just feel free to reach out. I can give you more information on the program. Even outside of the program, the community of physicians that are involved in supporting each other is super helpful to get people to kind of that next level. So let me know how I can help support you in hopefully changing your life and goals.
And do you have a start date for your next program?
I haven't published any official start date, probably looking in around November timeframe.
If you're interested, it is definitely time to reach out to Kristi at rocketyourrental@gmail.com or go to her website, rocketyourrental.com. I'll have that in the show notes as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I think this will be a great episode for our listeners. And
yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you all for listening to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.